So if it cost him a one and that means he doesn't go get Genty, that's probably a good thing for the Cowboys.
That's a good thought. That's a GM thought there. I like that. That's good.
But would Jerry have that thought?
I don't know. You guys know that better than I do. I try to be very politically correct about things these days.
It's the GM that might be the problem there, man. And maybe not necessarily the owner, but the GM.
Yeah.
Since they're one and the same, but it's the GM part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Look, I just think when you're these other teams that are thinking about, I know you guys keep coming back to Dallas and you showed that's your world. You're right. Those two guys together, those two cats on the defense together could just turn it upside down. And then I think about Dan Quinn though. By the way, when Dan left there, by the way, were you guys thinking, okay, he deserved his second chance? Is that? I mean, I know I'm not interviewing you guys.
I'll be honest because it's fun. When it was time, the defense was struggling. Like I go back to that Seattle game when Leighton Vander Esch got hurt. That defense wasn't as good for whatever reason. Just one guy made that much of a difference. But I've always felt like if Dan Quinn didn't get a head coaching job after interviewing the year before, he was going to be the scapegoat for Mike McCarthy. Somebody on that staff was going to go. And since Mike McCarthy was also the play caller, it was going to fall on DQ.
I see. Yeah, well, he goes up there and everyone's asking me, that. I mean, his leadership ability and his energy is going into a situation. It was kind of flipped role reversal. When he came into Atlanta, he was the guy that was a neophyte, the rookie guy coming in, and I was a guy who had 7 years under my belt. Now he's going up there with Adam Peters. Adam's a first-time guy as a GM. Dan's got the 6 or 7 years or whatever behind him. So I think that's why they pulled things off there, and I think it's a really important part. I know you weren't going in that direction, but I think it's always amazing to see what's going on in this league with the proper pairing of head coaches and GMs. It's fresh on my mind, of course.
Well, yeah, let's talk Washington, because I think what Dan Quinn did there, and obviously Cliff Kingsbury as well. We're big Cliff Kingsbury fans also, but just a change of culture, I think, with Washington. And it's not all Dan Quinn, obviously, but with the new ownership group and all of that, it just seems like a fresh team to me.
That's a fresh team. And we all went in, just like you guys did. You're like, okay, it's good. They're not a great roster necessarily. They have building to do there. Who would have thought? Everyone would have thought, like, hey, Jaden Daniels is a legit. But who would have thought that he had the savvy and the awareness and at every level being able to perform as he did, sets a tone with the head coach, the GM doing the good stuff that he's doing. And then you start thinking about, even Zach Ertz, I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I thought, oh, you need to get some youth there. I still believe, by the way, I'm a huge believer in a stout tight end group, right? You get one stud there, the FY guy, the combination, and get another guy. That's a big deal for those young quarterbacks. This guy, however, is not the guy that just needs some of the short and intermediate routes. We did that with Matt Ryan, right? We brought in Tony Gonzalez. We traded for him. It was one of the biggest free agency moves I had ever made because we had to. And so I just think continue to build that way. And anyway, I think they're in a good spot, but they have holes or areas to build in. And I think that'll be fun to watch how they're going to put that all together.
Thomas Dimitroff joining us here on the Blitz here on 94.1 at San Antonio Sports Star. You said the pairing, and I thought that was an interesting choice of words, pairing a head coach with the general manager. What were your thoughts on the Brian Schottenheimer hire in Dallas?
I'm a fan of that family. I've known that family a long time, so you might be backing me into the wrong situation here. I like him. I know you guys can tell me more about it. I wasn't surprised necessarily. I hadn't heard his name in the mix. It wasn't like his name was on all of my lists, right, in the sense of, you guys know this, right? As a guy, a former GM or a GM that's interviewing for jobs, out of jobs and interviewing for jobs, you tend to take 10, 15, 20 head coaches and you make calls and you interact with them. You start trying to figure out how would my connection be with this guy, right? He happens to be one that I didn't have that conversation with, right? It was a lot of the other guys you heard the names, right? So probably a bit surprising to me from that standpoint only, but I can't comment on it from a sort of a depthness standpoint. I don't know how I'd even approach that.
As a general manager, when you're hiring a head coach, what are some of the things that you're looking for? What are some of the questions you're asking?
Yeah, it starts with, I'm going to go in there and say, okay, what is your opinion about team building? what's your definition, and what do you see this team being? Meaning big, fast, strong, smart, athletic, explosive, whatever those mean, whatever those are, making sure you get an idea of where that goes, how they believe in building the team, what is their involvement in building the team, i.e. evaluation, where are they with their coaching staff and their involvement in in free agency and the draft. That's the big thing for a GM, right? How do you interact with GMs? What do you see that relationship being? Really pressing them on that, because you can get out of those interviews sometimes before we even get to the scheme side of it. You can really determine quickly, this cat's not the kind of guy I really want to be dealing with, because he's going to be siloed with his coaching staff. The great thing with Dan is Dan was one of the best to have, Quinn, as a coach who allowed his coaches in, and then I would allow, I hate saying that, but we would allow everyone to spend time together. You know, the coaches and the scouts would spend time. We would all pair off, or they would all pair off. The linebacker coach would go with one of our scouts who was really focused on the linebackers. And we do a lot of work that way, and I think that's important. So trying to figure that out, making sure, the last thing I'd say is being really communicative. If you're talking to a head coach in today's world and you don't communicate clearly, I don't think you have a chance. I'm not saying there's some guys that have that quiet mode. I'm not saying just a, chatty Cathy. I'm just saying someone that can be clear enough to make sure they don't sweep stuff under the rug. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. The quickest way to be at loggerheads and be in a bad spot is you keep burying things and you don't address the things that are on your mind. So those are a number. I could go on and on.
Sure.
It's an exciting topic for me, because it is so important, and how many people make mistakes. And when you ask me about pairing, I'm sorry, I'm going on and on.
No.
The pairing thing today, even the Jets, right? When I was in that process, and that was the first interview of that whole process, and as it started getting closer, and I realized, my God, they're going to hire the head coach before they hire the GM. That is something that's not how I was raised, right? I'm not saying it can't happen, but what Rick Spielman and Mike Tannenbaum were doing, they were in charge of the search there. They started playing this chess game, and this is not derogatory. That's why they were brought in. They were, hey, one time, one part of the week is, hey, we can get this GM, but, if we can get this head coach, well, I don't think he pairs with that guy really well. Let's bring this other GM up here. Okay, at one time they were going to come in and really think about having from the outset. The reason I even interviewed at New York, and I have a great deal of respect for their president, Jaime Eli, is I want to interview if you guys are serious about thinking about an experienced guy. If you're just bringing me there to tap into my knowledge and see or whatever, I wasn't interested in that. That's where they were going at the beginning. But in the end, it ended up being two neophytes. That was me and Mike Smith. You can do it. I like Darren Musi a lot. Aaron Glenn is a really good football coach. Those guys are, they're going to do their deal, but they're first timers in a city that you could say maybe needs some experience somewhere. But they decided to go a different direction. I think those guys can get it done for sure.
Although I would think if they're bringing back Aaron Rodgers, they need some experience there to deal with a player like Aaron Rodgers. Now, Thomas, you talk about all the different scenarios, and there's 32 jobs. So how picky can you really be? If there's an opening, do you just automatically apply? Or are there situations, you don't have to name a team, but that job came open, there's no way in hell you'd apply for it?
No, I think what happens more and more now, I remember when I first got into this business and I was around Bill Belichick, of course, because I was with New England, et cetera, but I'm really close with Scott Pioli, if you know that name. Scott's related to Bill Parcells through marriage. And he would tell me these stories, and Bill Parcells would say, as I understood, was like, there are 5 guys that I could work for. And I used to think, this was back in the day. I'm like, 5 guys? I'll work for 32. Give me, but now at my point in my career, you're a lot choosier, right? I'm like, I don't know if and you've seen, and we won't get into names, but some people have left the ownership world, and maybe those are some guys that were complicated to work with. And it's just interesting with the new people buying the teams. It's very different than the family owned, right? Those business guys that are coming in, it's about wins and losses. Arthur Blank was a great owner for me to work for. I appreciate it. He fired me in the end, and I have my issues with that. Of course, we still get along really well. But my biggest thing is I just think Arthur was a guy after two years, and that's what I feel a lot of the business guys are. Like David Tepper, I'm not answering for him, of course, but guys like that who come from the finance world, man, you hit it, you're fine. 2 years in, man, it gets hot fast, and it got hot with me a number of times with Arthur. We pulled out of it that last year with Dan and me. We just couldn't pull out of that funk.
Tom, I'm curious because football is, it's a tough game, right? Especially for GMs and for head coaches. When you get fired like that, and you, it's still got to hurt. That's part of the business, but that's still got to be a punch in the
It
gut,
sucks.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's a punch in the gut because, I was there for 13 drafts and free agencies in that role, 12 and a half. But that's where I took exception to Arthur a little bit. Like, I thought I was going to survive the end to the end of the season. Let's step back and see what we could have done. If not, then we move on. I get that. Yeah, that's tough. I think the biggest thing, and I say to everyone out here, how you're judged as a GM to start is your ability to pick the quarterback, manage the quarterback situation. Let's call it the way it is. You could do all you do on everything else, but if you're not doing that part of your job in today's world, I mean, you're struggling. I was very fortunate to have Matt Ryan we had him the whole time there. In that whole time, 1.5 games he missed. I was so fortunate, right? He had his ups and downs. We should have won the Super Bowl, should have, could have, whatever. In my mind, we should have been close to doing what we did. We lost it. And it hurts because I start thinking about, and I guess it hurts, whatever that word is. It's a competitive side, right?
Sure.
Like, there were things we could have done differently, and we always look at that. And that's why now when I'm interviewing, and it's funny because when you're a first-time interviewer, you can say anything that sounds good, right? Oh man, I like this. I can walk this guy to the podium because he said this, and this. I don't care how good you are, even if you don't have a lot of enemies, when you're a second timer, as coaches as well, of course, they're digging up bones, right? They are looking at everything that you did. They're talking to that search group, as I understood, were responsible to talk to 15 different people each. So they had 45 people that were talking to on my behalf. And you're going to have some people that are naysayers, right?
Yes.
In those situations. And whatever, it could be the area scout who he never paid attention to me. Whatever that means. I'm being a little bit facetious about it. It's a weird track back into those roads. And a lot of people, as you know, very few GMs get a second chance.
I'm curious as we visit with Thomas Dimitroff here, not football related, but GM related. I imagine at times it can be a very lonely job because you make a move and the whole world goes, what the hell did that guy just do? Like what we just saw this week in Dallas with Nico Harrison trading away Luke, a 25-year-old superstar.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
I mean, a lot of stones to pull that off.
Yeah.
And that's either going to get him a raise or fired pretty quick, right? I mean, but what's it like having to make a decision like that?
I think, and that basketball situation is really fascinating to me for a number of reasons. I have a great deal of respect for Sam Presti as well over there at OKC. And those guys, when you talk to them from a basketball standpoint, it feels a little bit different. When I think about us on the football side, you can't sit on your hands. You have to be aggressive in today's NFL, not for long. I know we throw that around a lot. You have to. I mean, that's why Howie Roseman is one of the best at what he does right now. Howie and Brett Veach, they're both at the top of their games. But Howie, what he does, I'm a big believer in that. You can't be the conservative tiptoe around guy. And with that means that the longevity of your career might be limited. You might either hit on them or not. I mean, when Julio Jones went down and we did that in 2011, I mean, I swear to God, half the world thought my head was wherever. And the other is like, wow, maybe he's got something figured. I remember standing there arm in arm with Arthur Blank, and they announce it. We're watching it on the big screen. And I think it was Gruden. He showed Julio Jones drop like 15 balls in a row. And you rarely see that. And I'm sitting there, my owner drops my arm and he looks at me. He's like, kidding me? And it's just one of those things. But that's life, right? So you're right. It's a lonely world for sure. You just have to have the ability to deal with that. And you have to have the ability to deliver those hard messages to the players and to your staff and to your coaching staff, right? Because that's another thing that's not easy. Not just your coach, the assistant coaches. If you're not direct with them, you get such a reputation right away for being, laissez-faire, wishy-washy. You can't be that. I don't think you can pull it off in the league anymore.
So you got to make a decision and then go with it, whether win, lose, or draw in that situation. And I find it interesting because GMs have a very difficult job. If you've got a player, and we opened up the conversation with Myles Garrett, if you needed some salary cap help, for example, with a guy you're about to pay a lot of money to, and he's a very popular guy in that particular franchise, and you make that call, I mean, I don't think fans will ever understand it, but I mean, do you have to get, just a big haul in return? I mean, we remember Herschel Walker and that big deal way back that Jimmy Johnson pulled off, and it gave the Cowboys, I think, 3 Super Bowls.
Yeah, I think, when you start thinking about that, and this was brought up as well, if you're dealing with a team potentially, you're Cleveland, you're like, you want the best pick possible. if you're at 25, 28, 29, you're like, gosh, that's really a second round pick ultimately, right? And everyone's like, well, would you just, would you turn your head to that and say, no, I'm not going to do that? Here's what I would say. When you're in the middle of that and what Andrew Berry's dealing with right now, all he truly wants in the very end, and it gets closer to that, is I need to do a deal on this. So I can sit here and get particular and try to think about 5, 6, and 7 in the draft. The fact is, in the end, if I can get 25, 26, 27, I got to take that and go. I got to, so I think it's a realistic point. This is a very complicated thing, I think, for Andrew Berry right now. I said that earlier too.
Well, I mean, and you look at, I know there's a formula, a value chart. Everybody has their, what they want in return, but what realistically they're going to get. And, I look at like what Dallas did, and I think, what is Nico thinking? On the next day, the Spurs pull off an incredible trade to get De'Aaron Fox. And you think about Pop and RC and Brian Wright, and they're playing chess while everybody else is playing checkers, it seems like.
No, that's right. I mean, that's the kind of thing that coming back to the GMs in this deal, right? There are some guys that are playing chess for sure, and Howie Roseman is playing chess when you start talking about the management and the action on all of this. And again, Andrew Berry's a Harvard guy, right? He's a smart cat for sure, and he can, it's going to be interesting to see. We'll continue to beat that up, but yeah.
I find this fascinating. We go on with you all day, and I just got to ask you this one question: the Ben Johnsons, the Aaron Glenns, the young guys that are coming out that are the so-called geniuses that are coming out. Is it tough to hire a guy like that and take a chance on somebody like that?
Yeah, I think Aaron's a little bit different, right? Because he's 50-something years old. He's not the 30 deal. I continue to say this. And this, you look at Sean McVay, he was an anomaly in this, right? Just because people have his tree doesn't mean they're all going to follow. We know that. I think it is complicated. I mean, I think it's a good mix when the league, like I said, has some of those guys doing that and, and then also having the experience. That's not just for my own ulterior motive, right? I believe this league, the New York teams right now are going to benefit from continuing to have experience there in one way or another. And I think the league needs that. I think they need a nice mix of both. Yep.
Thomas Dimitroff, Sumer Sports.
Sumer Sports. Yep. SUMER.SumerSports.com.
And people can go there.
We can go there. You guys can go there and check it out. Yeah, get educated, right?
Get educated.
I call them all the time, and they get mad at me. They don't get mad at me. They know I'm saying it lovingly. I said, there's the football side of Sumer Sports, and then there's a propeller head side of Sumer Sports. We all remember the propeller head. We're old enough to remember that kid sitting in the back of the house. But they're wildly intelligent and great people that I'm working with, and we're just continuing to evolve, and I love it. We have some really intelligent people that I learn every day from, so it's good for me.
Well, I hope to see you in the front office pretty soon.
I appreciate it. I do too. We'll see you.
Yeah, guys. Good stuff. Thomas Dimitroff here on the Blitz on 94.1 San Antonio Sports Stars. We continue with our AA Best Bail Bonds Radio Row coverage brought to you by Flight by Yuengling, Circa, Las Vegas.